Okay, welcome back to another edition of 42nd Street Pete's Grindhouse, and I just rediscovered this book, The Gore Netherworld of filmmaker Andy Milligan, the ghastly one, by Jimmy McDonough. And I don't know if this is still available or not. It's a really good book. But not only the fact that it covers Milligan, because it looks like Jimmy worked for Milligan, but it also covers a lot of the stuff that shaped 42nd Street. In the 30s, all those theaters were there, and basically they were like first-run Broadway theaters at one point, and then the Depression hit, which killed it, and then they came back as burlesque theaters. Something which enraged that mayor at that point, Farrell LaGuardia. And what happened was, to get rid of them, there was a bunch of fake laws passed by somebody connected to a man called Harry Brandt. And Harry Brandt and his brothers wanted all those theaters. And through subterfuge and payoffs and whatever, because the Brandts were big contributors to LaGuardia and his boys, they wound up with a few of the theaters. And the ones that they wound up with were the Apollo, the Empire, the Liberty, the Lyric, the Selwyn, the Times Square, the Victory, and the Rialto. The Victory seemed to be the crown jewel in the whole thing because there was over 1,000 seats in there. And basically these theaters were set up to run from 9 and 10 in the morning till 4 in the morning, which gave, them a chance to clean up all the debris left from, almost 24 hours of, whatever going on in there. And it also gave them a chance to remove a couple dead bodies here and there. And I'm not saying that people went in there and died violently or were murdered or something like that. We don't understand what was going on back then as far as, the returning WW2 veterans and things like that. And, we've only recently come to terms with battle fatigue, aka post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, no one was addressing that back then, and a lot of these guys fell through the cracks, became alcoholics, drug addicts, their health failed, and they would go in, these theaters, to crash because it was sometimes 99 cents to get in, and they'd go in there and crash, and sometimes they didn't wake up, which was sad. And unfortunately, I had to witness this myself later on in life when I was working for this place in Hackensack, and I was taking the garbage out, and there was this poor guy standing in this other yard, fenced in the rain, getting soaking wet, and I'm yelling at the guy. I said, "Dude, you all right? Are you all right?" And he wouldn't answer me. So I called the cops. By the time the cops got there, they couldn't find the guy, but the next morning, one of the help came in and said he swears there's a dead guy laying under the trailer. So I went out and I looked over the fence, and sure and shit, it was this poor bastard who was standing there all night, and I just really felt bad that I couldn't help him. But, like I said, going back to the theaters, I'm sure people got killed in there eventually, but back then it was more of a case of somebody going in there with half a shitter on and health problems and just not falling asleep and just not waking up. Going back to the Brandts were notoriously hard to deal with. They were all multimillionaires, and as millionaires go, they don't like to share. And Dave Friedman called New York City a bunch of moochers. And Dave had said that he had gotten into with the Brandts showing the Kroger-Babb film Mom and Dad. And Dave was selling those, pamphlets for whatever. And it seemed that Harry Brandt was incensed that he wasn't getting a piece of that money. See, Dave explained that basically they couldn't stand anybody else making a buck. So, that pissed them off. So what happened was they held back on Dave a bit, and Dave wasn't stupid. Dave had people checking the box office and shit and seeing what was going on. And when he found out that he was getting stiffed, he hired a bill collector to sit outside of Harry's office with this car with big signs over it, something to the effect that Harry Brandt doesn't pay his bills. Well, Harry got pissed off and paid Dave off, but basically told him, "I never want to deal with you again." And I remember Dave either told this story in his book, A Youth in Babylon, or at one of my Grindhouse panels at Cinema Wasteland. He said, yeah, well, Harry could go fuck himself. And then we came out with Blood Feast, and all of a sudden they were like, hey, how you been? Where are you? You want to make a deal? And legend has it that Blood Feast played the Rialto for 6 months straight. I can't confirm or deny that. That's just what I heard. And it was also said that, other exhibitors had problems with them, especially one of the other brothers. I don't know what he was. His name was Bingo Brandt. He was supposed to be the biggest prick of the bunch. Would make deals, then renege on deals halfway through, and pretty much screwed everybody. And there was an incident with another distributor, Joseph Brenner, who was in the hospital for emergency surgery, when Brandt called him just out of surgery and tried to fuck him out of deal. Well, Joe was not the forgiving type, and before this happened, he usually sent Bingo's wife a dozen roses around the holiday. So when they met at some kind of, I don't know, wherever they met at some time, Bingo remarked, my wife didn't get any roses, and Joe turned around and he goes, the only roses I'm ever going to send you are going to be the kind that are very unfriendly. And that was the end of it. Some people said Joe cut off his own hand, basically, because he couldn't get in anymore, but Joe was one of those guys who just didn't take any shit, and so was Dave Friedman. And there was a lot of stuff going on, but it seemed the big guy that sort of, took a lot of shit and stayed with them was the Michigans. And they were talking about, remember how I described those big, ornate, plywood-backed, things in front of the theaters that drew attention? Well, they were called fronts, and they were, I think, made by King's Amusements or something like that. But they could cost anywhere from $150 to $1,000 to put up. And the Michigans were famous for making all these outrageous fronts that basically had nothing to do with the fucking movie. So, I mean, this went on for years. There's a whole itinerary of guys that basically got screwed over by the branch. You did business with the branch, you got screwed. And everybody knew that, sort of like how to play the game, but Dave Friedman was vocal about it, and so were a lot of people. I mean, you had the Brants on one side, you had Chelly Wilson and Phil Tadero, basically with a bunch of, string of porn theaters on 8th Avenue. You had a couple other guys that own, I think, the New Amsterdam, the Antco, and the other one there, I'm trying to think, maybe the Harris, I'm not sure, but everybody had their finger in the pie, and the story with the whole Milligan thing was Milligan kept getting screwed and screwed and screwed. I mean, everywhere he went, he got burned. He even did business with the people, the Perinos, who would put out Deep Throat and one of his films, Blood, and again, nobody got paid. So I find the whole history of this thing fascinating because there's no other place like it in the world. And people wanted their stuff to run there. And, I also find it interesting that it was an Italian mayor who banned the burlesque, and it was another Italian mayor, Giuliani, who had a rabid hatred of pornography and did everything he could to put this place out of business. So, you go back to the heyday of all these things when it was all, great and exciting and stuff, and there was a theater on every corner. I mean, the bulk were on 42nd Street, but you had the World, you had the Bryant, these things were spaced all over the place, and it was like, a film goer's wet dream, for lack of better words. So, like I said, the history is really great. If you can pick up this book, the Ghastly One by Jimmy McDonough, it's definitely worth the read, and it has all that history condensed in there with quotes from Dave Friedman, Lee Hessel, Terry Levine, Sam Sherman, all the big distributors there, and their battles with the exhibitors. So that's our show for today. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for tuning in. On a sad note, Doug Sackman, who was, I guess, Sergeant Kabuki and worked for Trauma, passed away last week. I believe he was only 40-something years old. Another sad passing. And as I typed this, I just read that Martin Mull, great comedian, very low-keyed, had just passed away at 80 years old. So, it's just fucking sad to read this shit. So, thanks for subscribing. Thanks for tuning in. And above all, stay safe. And we'll catch you on the flip side.